Welcome to the Coffee and Counseling Podcast, where two licensed psychotherapists give you their unfiltered opinions on mental health, wellness, life, and everything in between. It's real, raw, and ready to challenge what you think you know. Get ready for some tough love. Before we begin, just a brief disclaimer, this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and does not take the place of therapy. We hope you enjoy today's session. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session of Coffee and Counseling, where we don't spill the tea, but the coffee will be piping hot while we talk about all things counseling. We're your hosts, Rachel Steinhardt
and Stephanie Schaick, and today we're breaking down a topic that gets a lot of attention online, and that's self-care. But we're not talking about the Instagram version with perfect spa days and scented candles and bubble baths. We're talking about the self-care you might not even realize counts, why the trendy version sometimes misses the mark, and a tough love moment, why self-care isn't always comfortable or pretty. So grab your coffee and let's get into it. Rachel, want to get us started with one high and low for this week?
One high and low of this week. Okay, so let's get into it. I feel so, and this is such a mental health moment, I feel so guilty for this being a low because I feel like I should just be grateful. So I'm trying to like simultaneously hold space for both being grateful for what I'm about to say and also being frustrated. Pretty much my brother lives in California right now, and I don't really get to see him a lot. And speaking to him is really hard because of the time difference, which I know it's not like that big of a time difference, but in both of our schedules, it's significant enough. Mm-hmm. And I just like miss him so much. And he came to visit and me and him and my mom's in town. So my mom and my sister who was there, we all like went out for this like big, really beautiful brunch. And I was so excited to have that like time with him. But my husband had work and I was like 1-on-3 with my kids. Mm-hmm. And so the entire thing just turned into like me chasing them and taking them potty and feeding them. And even though my family's always so helpful when I'm with my kids, like I didn't get to enjoy at all. I didn't get to like talk to him. I didn't get to spend that one-on-one time. He was like on the other end of the table. It was just like very disappointing when it's few and far between when we get to spend that like in-person time together. Mm-hmm. And then on the other hand, I have that part of my brain that's like, you're complaining for going out to brunch with your family. Like, what's wrong with you? So I'm trying to really hold space for both. It is frustrating. I don't get to see him. It's important. Like family time to me is my most prized possession. So I'm allowed to be upset about that. And then I'm also trying to hold space and I'm also grateful that I get any time and that I get to get out of my house and have these experiences, even if they don't look exactly the way that I want them to. Yeah, it seems so like weirdly enough, even though I thought that was going to be my high, that's kind of my low.
It was a letdown. It sounds like you had expectations and it didn't work out the way you wanted it to.
Exactly. Yeah, it was kind of a letdown. I'm hoping that, we'll just have another opportunity, hopefully sooner rather than later. My high would definitely have to be, and this, like, please, nobody make fun of me, but it's been a couple of years and I have not finished my wedding album. For all of you who've done wedding albums, and Steph, one day, very soon, you will learn this. We procrastinate till the end of time, and it's a very long, rigorous, exhausting process. Because you're going through like hundreds, if not thousands of pictures and then narrowing it down and then putting it in a certain order and then editing it. It's a very long process. Mm-hmm. I'm finally finishing it this like week or two. So I'm finally going to get the final version. And it's just, I've been working on it for years. So I'm so excited for this to be over and to actually have it and to actually see it. And it's around my anniversary because my anniversary is actually on Friday that we've hit 6 years, which is of married and 7 years of being together. So it's very exciting. And I'm just very excited to finally see the final product.
Oh my gosh. I can't wait to see it. Next time I'm down where you are, I need to see it.
Oh my gosh. I have to show it to you. Yeah. It's pretty. It's nice. It's very special to me. So
it's a big project.
But what about you, Steph? What are the highs and lows? Did we paint?
We did, and it's so funny. I'm looking, I'm like, you could barely tell in the video. I don't know if you could tell in the
No,
video,
you
but
cannot tell. I'm
you
so
can't.
sorry.
No, it's okay because like in person, like it looks significantly different, but it's still part of the White family. So I'm like, it doesn't really look too much different on there. But yes, I finished painting. So that would be my high. Like there's a couple more areas that I'd like to, but I'm like, it's not like my closet. I'm like, that's not even a priority right now. I'll do it when I feel like more up to it. So I was so happy to like have that done, and I love the color. It wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be, but it turned out better. So like I'm not complaining about that at
That's
all.
so great. I'm so excited and I'm so proud of you that you did that all on your own. God
Thank
bless.
you. I had help, and I have to do a shout out. My brother helped me tremendously. So thank you for
Wait, your
that.
brother was in town?
He lives here. Yeah, my parents and my brother had moved here about last year.
I didn't Oh, okay. I thought the only family that lived here was the one that lived near me.
Yeah, that one too. But yeah, last year my parents and my brother moved down. I still have one sister that's a holdout in New York, and she's listening.
Oh,
She knows it.
shout out to Steph's family. Love
Yes.
that.
Yes.
That's so
And
special. Okay,
yeah,
great.
yeah. So my low would be tied into that. So I was noticing that over the last couple of weeks, I had like a bit increased anxiety. And upon therapizing myself and being really aware of what was like caught, like what was triggering it, I realized what it was. So I am going to do my best to put this in a very short, succinct story. Rachel, you know a lot of this already from last year when the warranty thing was going on with my house and they needed to replace all of the floors. Do you
Oh my
remember
goodness.
that? It
Yes.
was, I'm like feeling stressed already, just like thinking about, like thinking back to it. I mean, it was a really stressful time to say the least. It was like I had to be put up in a hotel for over a week, and that's just in and of itself that's kind of like frustrating, but I'm like I understand like the floors were laid down wrong, so I'm like I understand how to do it. But then afterwards, the amount of arguing and conflict I had to get into with all the people, the companies, the warranty company, because they basically went through my house and it just was an absolute mess. And it took a long time, like a month after I got back, for it to return to normal. And there was a lot of stress involved in all of that. And before, of course, I went out, I was trying to move as much as I could out of the house because I really, to be really honest, I didn't really trust people to be moving it around without banging into the walls and stuff like that. It didn't matter because
100%.
they were
Yeah.
banging into the walls and all of that anyway, which was part of like the argument. They were trying to, come in, fix the walls, do the paint. Luckily, it wasn't painted by that point, but there was just a lot. So anyway, I can't even do that story justice without needing like 3 business days to debrief as to what happened. But it was a really, really stressful time. And then when I was moving, and I haven't like moved my furniture around and all that stuff since then, obviously everything went back in its place, but like moving it out and kind of having it out of order, I noticed that actually was because of the painting. I was moving everything out of the way. It started triggering like the feelings back from that moment. And I guess my body was like, it's like your body keeps the score. It was thinking back that that was a really stressful time. Are we going to go back into that type of time? And when I realized that, there was a lot of power in that. And of course, as I was painting and getting everything back in order really helped me a lot. But that really brought up a lot of stress. And I figured out why that is. And I hate thinking back to that moment in time. That obviously everything worked out in the long run, but it was just really rough. So that
Yeah, I'm
came back,
sorry
and
that
that's
you
where
go
we
through
are.
that. Oh my gosh, that's not fun at all.
Thank you. Thank you. It was not fun at all. And I am hopeful to not have to deal with something like that again for at least a very, very long time, if ever.
Amen. Man.
Yeah, yeah, because I'm done with that. So let's talk about why we wanted to cover this topic about self care. So when we're thinking about self care, unfortunately, especially with social media, it has become so commercialized. It's almost become like a product instead of a practice. And clients and even sometimes therapists too really I find often overlook the less glamorous forms of self care, which are just as important and probably even more so. Like I said, when we talked about in the introduction, that, yeah, the bubble baths and the scented candles and all of that certainly could be acts of self care, but we overlook a lot of the times the very small things, or even the things that are not comfortable in the moment that are forms of self care. From an angle of tough love, self care is sometimes doing the hard thing that you don't want to do rather than the easy thing that you enjoy. So, we're going to explore that in today's session and hopefully give you a new perspective or a few new perspectives on self care.
Okay, so let's talk about what is self care in actuality. And this is a very multifaceted conversation because as much as I make jokes, and I feel like we made a joke about this in the beginning of the episode, we say like, oh, self care isn't just like lighting a scented candle. But here's the reality: sometimes it is. Sometimes part of self care is really just lighting a scented candle or taking a bubble bath. And I think when we're talking about those type of activities like fixing our main life problems, that's when we make jokes of that's not the kind of self-care that we're talking about. And so I think it's very important to also differentiate the fact that there are different types of self-care for different moments and aspects of life. There's different levels of self-care, and it can look different depending on your environment, your situation, what your life is allowing for at that time, right? So, for example, my self care when I am postpartum and my self care one day when my kids are grown and out of the house is not going to look the same.
Mhm.
Also, understanding your needs at a certain period of time. So, having that intentional action to support your physical and mental and emotional health. It's not just indulgence in things that feel good in the moment, like that bubble bath. So,
Mhm.
really thinking about using, like I said, the intentional action. What is the intention behind what you're doing? And are you trying to genuinely fill your cup by by doing this act? So scrolling through Instagram and saying this is self-care, I'm taking a break, that's not self-care. Even if for those few seconds it feels good and it's distracting you from life, that's not self-care. There's nothing about that that's filling your cup. And I think something you really need to think about when we think about self-care is, how is this adding to my energy? How
Mhm.
is this healing my mental space? How is this giving my battery and my car like more fuel, more energy to be able to do all the tasks I need to do, to be able to have a continuous healthy perspective, to be able to manage my mental health, my physical health. All of those things are part of self-care. So yes, sometimes it's blasting the radio in the car and driving down a freeway, and sometimes it's brushing your teeth if you're having a hard time doing that. And sometimes it's giving yourself a nutrient dense meal. It depends what your life looks like, what you're lacking in that space, and what you need, right? So maybe you are in a space where mentally you really haven't had a beat. You haven't had a moment to process thoughts. You haven't had a moment to sit with yourself and to go out into nature and to sit down, within the mountains and the trees and take a few deep breaths and just sit in silence. That can be self care for you in that moment. It depends on your setup and your needs. It doesn't always feel good in the moment. So I think a lot of the time we think about self care being things that um, feel sometimes luxurious, feel good, give you the warm and cozies and fuzzies, but that's not always true. Sometimes self care looks like going to physical therapy after an injury.
Mhm.
That doesn't always feel good. That doesn't always excite us. We don't always want to do that. Sometimes it hurts. But making that time and setting the intention of, I am going to prioritize myself and my health, and I'm going to go to this appointment and I'm going to do what I have to do, that is also a form of self care. So, understanding really the broad spectrum of what self care actually is defined as, and understanding and internalizing that it's not selfish to take time for yourself. It's not selfish to treat yourself, especially when it is something that's more indulgent, when it is something that does feel good. It doesn't make it selfish. We've heard this 1,000 times. We can't, put the mask on the person next to us in the airplane if we don't put on our own mask first. We can't pour from an empty cup. These are cliches for a reason, because it's true. We have got to care for ourselves in order to do anything else. This is what gives us the sustainability to continue to manage our life. And it does really need to be prioritized. It can't just be when it when it fits in the schedule. It needs to be a priority within the schedule
Mhm.
that's put in there the same way that whatever other basics you're doing are put in there. Like if you need to go to the bathroom, come hell or high water, you're going to the bathroom. And you
Mhm.
kind of have to think of it that way. Going to the bathroom is a form of self care. You need to go, right? So
Mhm.
we need to perform acts of self care. The question becomes, what does that look like in your situation, in your setup, with your financial abilities? Not all of us are like, I need some self care. I'm going to take a 2-week vacation and go to the Maldives. That's not everyone's form of self care. So that's really just going into this conversation, something to think about in the back of your head, that intention, the need in that moment, filling up your cup, the reality of what you're able to do, and just keeping all of that in mind as we go through the phases of this conversation.
Mhm. In going back to the candle thing for a moment, just brought up a memory that Rachel, I'm not sure if you remember, but this was years ago. And I don't know what it was. I was upset about something, and we were at work together, and I was talking to you, and I didn't really feel like talking about it too much, but I remember just being upset. And you're like, okay, on our break, what we're doing is we're going to the mall, and you brought
Yes,
me
I
some
remember
Yankee
this.
candle. And she had me sniffing candles, and it was such a nice little thing, and it did help. I mean, having some time to spend with you and just doing something like that, so it absolutely can look like that. And hopefully we all have a friend that can bring us to the Yankee Candle or Bath and Body Works and make us smell the candles. That was awesome. All right, so let's
Bath and
talk
Body
about.
Works, feel free to sponsor us.
Right? That would be amazing. Okay. The fall candles are coming out. Let's do it.
Let's go.
We wanted to talk about the Instagramification of self care, or the TikTokification, or the YouTubeification, or whatever social media you want to put in there. Marketing has turned self care into a brand, like a luxury brand. And that's how we think about self care a lot of the times because of social media. I'm not sure if you guys have seen this, and I think it used to be more of a thing in the past, but I definitely see it still coming up, like people's morning routines, like on YouTube. And sometimes they have, like, they're like, oh, I wake up and I do like 20 minutes of stretching, and then I drink this cup of water. I do it slowly, and then I journal for 30 minutes, and then I drink a slow cup of tea, go for a walk, and then I'm going to do my workout, 30 minutes of skincare, meditation. I'm like, okay, you would need 3 business days to do all of these things. But then we all start to compare. It's like, oh, maybe we should be doing all of those things. And then our self-care, if journaling is a method that you use to self-care, it then starts to become more of a burden if you don't have the 30 minutes of journaling that you think you're supposed to take every morning. So we don't want it to become that. We do want to prioritize the time, but their morning routines are just showing you a million and one different things that you could do. And maybe there are some ideas for self-care for you, but maybe you journal every other day. Maybe on the weekends is when you enjoy a slow, like, sipping of a cup of tea. It might not look like that. And probably for most people who have normal lives, you're not going to have this type of self care ritual, if you will. And it's really morphed our brains into thinking that these things are normal, that we can do all of these things. And unfortunately, we usually all have jobs, we have kids, we have school, whatever it might be, that makes it difficult sometimes to do all of the things. So what I would encourage anyone to do, and we're going to talk about it more, is to try to find a couple of things that are really necessities. Like, these are my non-negotiables that I need to do every single day for self-care. And perhaps it's just making sure that you have a certain amount of water each day, making sure that you move your body at like 5 to 10 minutes each day. It could look different for every single person. So we encourage everyone to be reflective on their circumstances and their lifestyle to try to create what makes the most sense for them. We don't want it to create more stress, but rather what Rachel had said, pouring into your cup, doing self-care that might not feel good always in the moment, but like having a hard conversation and setting a boundary might be a method of self-care, but it might not feel great in the moment. And like we talked about, treating ourselves to a spa day or to maybe a little bit of shopping or something like that, those absolutely could be parts of self-care. However, if we're looking at it from like perspective of like a pie chart, that's going to be more of a smaller part, because the methods of self-care that we need to be prioritizing every single day, it's our hygiene, it's our nourishment, it's our physical self-care, and it's going to be things that don't usually cost a ton of money, and sometimes it doesn't cost a lot of time either, and it's well worth the investment as well.
So let's talk about some of the less attractive, less luxurious, less
Mhm.
fun, and very often overlooked parts of self-care. So, like I said, going to physical therapy, going to talk therapy. Sometimes these things are uncomfortable, they're painful, they're not fun. Keeping up with doctor's appointments, setting boundaries, and holding those boundaries. That is one of the most underrated forms of self care because we don't
Mhm.
think of setting boundaries as self care. But at the end of the day, that is a piece of life that is holding your peace. Obviously, we spent an entire session talking about this, and you can go back and hear it and, the healthy and appropriate ways to set boundaries. But when you are holding and maintaining boundaries that are keeping your energy sacred, it is such an important part of not just self care when you're feeling down, of a management within your entire life, of setting yourself up for success where your energy isn't being drained by people who don't even deserve it, or people who are just harming you. Because that is a really huge part of self care as well. A less thought of thing also, paying your bills, financial planning, being responsible with what you're doing with your schedule, your money, your time, putting off short-term gratification for a long-term goal. If you are, for example, saving for a house, that process of every time you want to do something, instead you're pocketing it, that's like a long-term form of self-care because you're working towards the goal of getting yourself a home. That's a beautiful thing to care for yourself, but it's not fun. I mean, saving's not always a fun situation.
Mhm.
It's not a fun topic sitting there with, Excel charts and financial planning and financial advisors. Like,
Mhm.
these are all very underrated things that, maybe some people wouldn't define as self-care, and that's fine. But these are forms of, think of it this way, caring for yourself, your life, your future, your wellness.
Mhm.
Um, and within the, going back to boundaries for a moment, within that framework, saying no to people, saying no to things that you don't want to do, saying no to events, saying no when somebody asks you for something that quite frankly you don't want to, or you can't, or it's insanely inconvenient for you to do. um if you need rest, that's important as well. And everybody knows, whoever's been listening to this podcast this whole time, Steph and I do not come from a background or a culture or a thought process of constantly putting yourself first, or prioritizing the self desire above all else. We just,
Mhm.
that's not the frame of work we work from here. But there's a time and place, and you do need to, much of the time, think about yourself and put yourself first in order to just function and, lead a healthy life. um Within relationships as well, having difficult conversations instead of letting resentment build, it's super uncomfortable. I know that, it's so funny because everyone assumes that this is so not a thing because I'm a therapist, but I absolutely cannot stand when I think that somebody that I'm friends with is like mad at me, and I'm just holding it in my head and building it, and it's eating me alive, and I'm too scared to say something about it. And that's something I have to hold myself accountable for, is mustering up the courage to talk to the person and bring it up and talk it out and be ready to hear what the other person has to say. But I do it, and I push myself to do it as much as I hate it, and it stresses me out and it makes me anxious, because at the end of the day, that will service the situation, and it's also will care for me because I'm not sitting there bundled up in anger and resentment. I'm actually taking action to fix a problem. And in the long run, I'm potentially and hopefully saving a relationship, or being able to detach myself from something unhealthy that's just dragging out.
Mhm.
So figuring out for yourself, like, what are some of those things that I don't really like to do, that I don't really like to associate myself with, that I always procrastinate on, or whatever it is, because it makes me really uncomfortable or it stresses me out. But in reality, it's actually a form of care for myself. It's something I need to do to maintain my well being, and I'm not doing it. That is also a form of self care, even if it doesn't feel good. Um, Asking for help before you hit a burnout,
Mm,
using your support system, whatever it might look like, your community, your friends, reaching out, saying, I need some extra support right now. That is also a form of like self-care, something that is very big that I told Steph about in the Jewish community, having meal trains, having people in the community who are able to help you with your family, your kids, or whatever it is when somebody has either a beautiful thing like having a child or having a loss of something much harder, that we try to be there for each other. Let the community, your friends, your family, whatever that looks like for you, let them be there for you. Again, that's something that some people feel super uncomfortable with, but is life altering and is definitely a form of self care.
mm,
And just looking at this from a tough love type of angle, which Steph and I are all about the tough love, sometimes
mhm,
self care is boring, it's inconvenient, and sometimes it honestly feels worse before it feels better. And it's just something to think about, within the self care space, is don't just go based off of what it's doing for you within that second, because sometimes within that second it's not feeling too hot, so that's
mhm.
okay.
Totally. And we're hoping to get you guys thinking of all the different ways that self care can look like that maybe you're overlooking in your everyday life. So you can recognize, hey, this is where maybe I'm really excelling with self care, or maybe this is something that I really need to consider more so and take up a bit. So let's start by talking about social connection. Some ideas when we're talking about self care from a social standpoint is calling a friend, setting the boundaries with a person who might be draining you or not adding to your life in any way, and it's just a really tough relationship. Maybe it's joining a group or connecting to faith or community, and we're really big on that. Then we have physical self-care, and this is something really important, especially when we're talking about mental health, because a lot of times we can overlook all of what we need to do for our bodies, and too often we kind of neglect our bodies and what it actually needs in order for it to be optimized and healthy and taken care of. So we have the physical self-care where we might be stretching and trying to move our bodies in ways that feel good and are helpful to strengthen our body or strengthen our heart, or just have your body feeling in a better state. Maybe that's going for a walk. Maybe, and this is something that I really value, is taking breaks, like especially if you like sit all day long or you are standing all day long, like getting up and moving a little bit, or if you're alternatively, if you are someone who has a very physically demanding job, taking breaks and sitting down, giving your body a break. But also, like I said, if you're sitting a lot, I know that when I'm sitting a lot, I start to get like antsy and I start to feel more pain. So I like to get up, walk around, even if it's just like a 2-minute walk or stretch every hour or so. That's always a useful thing. And then we have nourishment. We want to make sure that we're nourishing our bodies regularly, drinking enough water, eating meals that have ideally are balanced. And that might not look like every single meal because that sometimes is life. But more often than not, we want to make sure that we're getting all the different nutrients that we ideally should be getting. Then we have mental and the emotional self care. So, mentally, maybe we're talking about cleaning up your physical space. I talked about earlier that one of the things that triggered anxiety for me was just having my space in a place of disarray. Obviously, it was tied to a prior experience, but when things get back into place, it really was helpful. And I'm a big person that your mind can be reflected in your physical space. And I know that that's a whole Marie Kondo thing that was a big trend a few years ago, and I'm not saying that's like the be all and end all, but she has some point to that, where when we have so much physical clutter around us, it could really cause mental clutter or anxiety.
such a real thing. It's such a real thing. I tell people
Mhm.
all the time, like, one of the first things you can do, and I say this to clients, if you're feeling anxious, go clean your room. I'm like, go
Mm,
clean your room. First of all, just the act of organizing
yeah.
is it could be very soothing, and it creates like a mental declutter and gives you that space to like work through your thoughts while you're physically decluttering.
Mhm.
But yeah, walking into a space or a room that's clean. I always tell people this. What is it about when you walk into a hotel where you haven't even like done anything, but a lot of the time you walk into a hotel and you're like, wow, like
Yeah.
I feel like I'm on vacation. And I'm like, there's such a big part of that is the fact that you're walking into an empty room. Like it's a
Mhm.
room of just it's like basics. You have the bed, the bathroom, the TV, a picture on the wall.
Yeah.
And for most people, I mean, I don't know, like amazing for you. I know for a lot of people, especially with families, with kids running around, like that's not your house space all the time. There's
Mhm.
clutter here and there. And anyone who just, has a really busy lifestyle or work, and it really does have this effect on you. If you ever remember what it's like if you just done like a deep clean or a spring cleaning and you walk into your home and you're like, whoa, right?
Mm.
So whatever version of that is realistic to try to keep up a little bit more often, it is. I'm with you, Steph. It's such a big thing for the
Yeah.
mental decluttering for sure.
Yeah, and another part of mental decluttering is limiting the mental like the noise coming in. And
Mhm.
this is something that personally I struggle a lot with because I like to I normally have something like if it's not people, it's like I'll have a video playing or a podcast playing and even though I'm enjoying it, sometimes I need like time in silence.
Mhm.
And I always joke about this, but like I'm like half joking and half like so serious. And people laugh at me all the time when I say this. And I'm like, I just need some time to sit and stare at a wall. And that's it. And that is something that having that blankness and not, and obviously it's a lot easier said than done because our mental stuff usually is taking over. But if you can have just a moment without all the noise coming in and not stimulating yourself in all of those ways that we normally are stimulated just going through our daily lives, it could be really helpful. So I know that if I just take a couple minutes where I could get some silence and try to eliminate all that other distraction, it could be extremely renewing. Rachel had mentioned this too about organizing your finances, making a to-do list where we feel that we have plans, we have everything to the best of our ability in order. Now, life is not a matter of having everything in its place and being perfect with all of that. But if there's something that could be helpful to for you to put it all in one place, or making a budget where you feel more in control of your finances, that is incredibly helpful. And then we have emotional self care within this space. This might be therapy. It might mean giving yourself time and space to like cry or to feel your feelings and without judgment. And of course, we want to be mindful of keeping that in its area. We don't want to have all day long where we just can't stop crying. That's something, of course, I hope you're talking to a therapist about. It that is you. But sometimes we need to cry and sometimes we need to feel our anger and all these emotions that we might try to push away. Sometimes we just actually need an outlet for them in a non-judgmental space. So allow that to come through. Maybe that's in journaling or turning off notifications from your phone and not having all of the noise. Rachel has Shabbat every weekend, and they turn off their phones. And when I was there for the Shabbat a few weeks, oh, maybe a couple months ago at this point, time is flying, so I don't know.
Yes.
Turning off my phone and not having it like with me, that's a lot, and that really is such an opportunity to connect and take care of your emotional well-being. I know that you've said that so many times, Rachel, that it's so beneficial for you.
Oh my gosh, I'm so grateful. I told Steph, I was like, sometimes at the end of Shabbat, I like still don't turn my phone on. I just wait till Sunday. I'm like, just let it last a little longer.
The bliss, I love it. And that's with digital boundaries. Maybe you're muting accounts that are you're finding that are more upsetting to you than helpful or taking social
Mhm.
media breaks. I'm so big, both of us are, on taking breaks from social media. And maybe that's just a couple hours for you. Maybe it means just being more mindful about how you are operating or going on social media and using it. But any type of break that you can get from that is it's good, and I would encourage everyone to have regular breaks from social media. So then there's practical self-care. So this is like putting gas in your car before you're freaking out that you have to be at work and it's 20 minutes away and you have like literally your gas is on empty. So preparing ahead of time or organizing your wallet or purse so you're not stressed when you need something. This is something that I do all the time. Like whenever I have a receipt, I'm like trying to get out of the store really quick. I just put it in my purse and it adds up really quickly. And then it gets me all scrambled when I have a purse full of like receipts and papers and all of that stuff. So cleaning it out can be really helpful just to not feel stressed like when I'm in the middle of trying to find my wallet to pay for something or getting my hand sanitizer out or whatever it is. Maybe it's paying a bill early instead of waiting last minute and you're kind of running up against the late date and because you're not planning properly, planning the week's meals or the next day's meals so you're not scrambling, and that could be really helpful. So some ways of self-care that is more in the tough love category is unfollowing a social media account that makes you feel badly or it's promoting some bad behaviors that you're trying to get away from. Finally, making a phone call that you've been avoiding or setting an appointment that you've been avoiding. Maybe it's saying no to an opportunity that doesn't align with your values, even if it looks good on paper. And that is something that I know that I've run up against before, personally, when I have agreed to make a statement for someone asking for just therapist perspectives and whatnot, and I didn't really know, and I didn't do the due diligence to know like what it was actually going into, and then recognizing that my quote, which I did believe in, totally was taken into like a different context that I actually don't agree with. So just being mindful about stuff like that, and maybe that's going to look different for me for you, but if there's something that you are getting invited out to go to a bar for drinks and you really are, it's not something that you like to do, or it's something that you feel is against your values or whatnot, maybe you say no, and that's okay. Owning up to a mistake instead of dodging accountability, taking accountability for our actions, the responsibility is tough, but it could be really freeing as well. And then lastly, one of the other areas here is getting honest with yourself about a habit that's draining you. If you are engaging in something or having a relationship or whatever it is that is hurting you more than anything else, trying to be mindful of that and eliminating that from your life can be a really wonderful act of self-care.
Yeah, like life altering.
Mhm.
And so whenever you have that moment of realization that something in your life is harming you more than it's helping you, and being able to have that awareness and then do something about it and take action is so life changing, and honestly leads me to our next point of like how to tell if your what you are perceiving as your self-care is actually almost self-sabotage and harming you. So for example, think about, is this helping whatever act of self care I'm doing right now? Is this helping me in the long run, or is this just numbing my discomfort now? So I know I have a lot of my clients are very into like coming home from work and engaging in different forms of substances. And I'm just like, listen, I'm not here to tell anybody how to live their lives. But at the end of the day, like, why is that the form of self-care that's working for you? Are you unable to find forms of comfort in other things? Are you not, like, instead of utilizing that time to sit with yourself, to process your thoughts, to process your feelings, are you just numbing yourself? I think such a humongous theme in every single topic that we talk about is intention. The intention behind why you're doing what you're doing. It's very similar, by the way, to like with alcohol, right? If you're going out for like a girls' night or a guy's night and you're like, you're having a drink and you're talking and you're enjoying yourself, like, great. Like that, I think that's a beautiful form of self-care. You're having a social situation and you're going out and, having a drink to whatever is, I happen to really like the taste of my cocktails.
Mhm.
But if you're like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to numb myself,
Yeah.
we're not, but we're entering a different category. That is not a form of self-care. That is a
Mhm.
form of escaping your reality. That is
Mhm.
dangerous. That is unhealthy. So thinking to yourself, like, is what I'm doing just an escape from my life and my problems? And obviously, there are certain things that are an escape from your life that are much healthier and safer escapes. So, for example, like if you are going through, I'll give you an example. There's this beautiful, beautiful um, Jewish camp called Camp Simcha, and it's a camp. It literally means the camp of happiness,
Aw.
and it's a camp that people go to and families are associated with who have, I believe, it's terminal illnesses. And the entire point of that camp is to create an escape and to create a distraction. But that would be a healthy form of that because these people are in situations where they're limited on what they can do. This is their life and they're doing everything that they can to physically take care of themselves. This is what they need to do to mentally take care of themselves, to have that time to escape from their reality so that they can, keep their head above water and mentally and emotionally survive. That's
Mhm.
different than removing yourself from your reality where it's not actually filling into your cup. This camp, for example, it is literally fueling these families and these kids and literally filling up their cup. So just wanted to create like a distinction between those two things. Um, think about, are you treating yourself as a way to avoid change? So if you are in, let's say you're in a very unhealthy relationship and like a romantic relationship, and every single time you guys get into an argument, you decide, I'm going to go on a shopping spree, and you buy and buy and buy things until you feel like you care a little bit less about the argument you got into, when
Mhm.
deep down you really know that this relationship needs to end, that it's not healthy, that you guys are not a good match. So every single time, instead of sitting down and working through, your barriers emotionally and getting yourself ready to have this difficult conversation and working through this issue, you get into a fight with this person and you just go out shopping. In that moment, shopping is not a form of self-care. It is a way of avoiding what you actually need to do. That would actually be the self-care. In that situation, the breakup would be the self-care, not the shopping.
Mhm.
So trying to,
Mhm.
right, so it's like really just trying to understand these forms of self-care that are more like feel good, which again, there's nothing wrong with them, but it's what's that intention behind it. If
Yes.
you've been having like back-to-back crazy work weeks and you're burnt out and you're like, I want to go have a girls shopping day with my friends, that's great. That is self-care. We love that for you.
Mhm.
If you are taking a moment to say, let me run away from my problems, again, that unhealthy form of escape, especially when there is a change that can be made, when there is things that can be altered to change the situation, to fill your own cup, to provide for your own health, that, do that instead of the thing that is quote unquote pretending to treat yourself. um then there's this piece of this danger really of this I deserve it type of attitude and thinking, when it's replacing responsibility. So an ongoing theme in this conversation of self-care, really, if you've been hearing the theme in what Steph and I are saying, a lot of it is being responsible, honestly, and creating a form of structure and stability. And I want to say this, there is a time and space for everyone to have their different types of characteristics. Like there's some people out there that are like, I'm a free spirit, I'm a free bird, I live in a different place every week. My point is, like, to each their own. Everyone has their own form of what they would consider as stability. And we're not here to tell other people the right way to live life.
Mhm.
That being said, it's like a 2 plus 2 equals 4 thing. If you set certain stability up for yourself, if you create certain situations where you're just making your life easier and you're stopping yourself from being faced with multiple types of stressors and multiple types of problems that are bound to arise if you don't deal with these issues, it's going to catch up with you. It's not a matter of like we're telling you how to live life or like this is the way that you should structure your world. But
Mhm.
at the end of the day, like Steph said, it's just like a 2 + 2 is 4. If you don't have your receipts like ready to go when you want to return something,
Mhm.
and you are running out the door and you're stressed out and you're like, I have 10 seconds and this line is already running late and I have to go to my appointment. And now you're sitting there, your bag is like all over the floor. You're trying to take all your stuff out to try to find this receipt. You didn't realize your credit card fell out of your bag. You couldn't find the receipt. You couldn't even return it. You're just creating like unnecessary stress. That might be a silly example because you're like, what's the big deal? Just like find the receipt when you get there and that's it. And yes, that is a very small, silly example. But in the larger scope of things, like, for example, being financially responsible or being ahead on your doctor's appointments, like your health and things like that, those things will catch up with you no matter how laissez faire you are and how like gone with the wind you are and how free
Mhm.
bird of a human you are, which like, no hate, that's great. If that's your style, that's totally fine, but just there's a way to do that and simultaneously create levels of structure and responsibility within your life so that you are setting yourself up for security and protection and success and not keeping you in situations where all these issues are bound to arise.
Yeah.
um so thinking of it that way, signs that you're using self-care as a shield from growth, and I think this is very much connected to the piece of just kind of like distracting yourself, right? Am I, we talked about this also, I think, with boundaries, where it's like, are you creating a space of comfort so nothing needs to change? Like,
Mm.
are you just doing things to make yourself survive this situation? And this also reminds me of our conversation around, surviving instead of thriving. At the end of the day, you can be thriving. And if you're doing things to just get you from one day to the other when you don't have to be in that state, that's another form of, you like not using healthy forms of self-care. If you're just doing different actions that feel good in the moment, but they're creating a wall between you and doing the hard thing to get to the other side, that's not helping you. That is
Mhm.
harming. Sometimes doing that hard thing, taking that hard step, putting that foot in front of the other, that is the self-care. A lot of the time when Steph and I first get a call for like a consult call, the first thing I'll say, and I mean it completely genuinely from the bottom of my heart, is like, you should be really proud of yourself for
Mhm.
calling me today or emailing me, because that is a huge step for people.
Yeah.
Making that decision of like, not only am I ready to go to therapy, not only am I gonna try to go to therapy, I like mustered up the courage and sent the email or made the call. That's a really uncomfortable for a lot of people. It's scary. It's like, what am I about to get myself into? Who's this person I'm about to talk to? It's a lot. And a lot of that time, that first step in those hard directions, that really difficult thing that you need to do that gets you over that hump, is like the beginning of the rest of your life. It's that thing that can change everything for you for the better. And so
Mhm.
I doing things and disguising it behind the concept of self-care, when in reality it's just stopping me from growing and creating a more bigger and more beautiful and more life altering life for myself.
Mhm. Totally. And when we're talking about self-care, it's a lifestyle. It's not a checklist. And with that being said, we can knock off all the things that we say, like, oh, I need to do this for my acts of self care. However, it really needs to work with your life. And it's really important for you to know yourself, to know what is acts of self care. And something that I was thinking of when Rachel was talking about, which really fits well into what we're about to talk about, it's, I know for me, whenever I have a rushed morning, it just sets me off in not a great way. And I don't like waking up and feeling like I'm running to do what I need to do to get to working or get to wherever it is that I need to do. So something that is really important for me, for self-care, is waking up early. And I do not like waking up earlier than I need to. I definitely would say I'm more of a morning person. However, I don't like actually waking up. But once I'm awake, I'm pretty good. But when I have to set my alarm earlier to make sure that I'm up by a certain time to give me some time to have more of a slow morning, I try to get some sunlight if I can. I try to go for a little bit of a walk, try to get that in, and that really helps to put me in a better spirit, and also is really good for your circadian rhythm, which is good for your sleep too if you're interested in that. But I try to do that. I try to get my coffee. I know I don't normally have a ton of extra time, so and I'm not really a breakfast person. However, I do find it's very important that we all have something for our breakfast. I am a big person on that. So what I do is I prepare the night before. I prepare smoothies so that I have that for my breakfast to get me started very in a vitamin packed way, and it helps me to make sure that I'm always getting something in, even when it's not the top of my to-do list or something like that. So these are just like little ways that I am aware of me and how I operate and what my likes and dislikes are, what are my challenges and what are my barriers and what are ways that I operate in order to figure out how this all can work together. And that took a lot of time to figure out that this is what is best for me in order to make sure I'm taking care of myself in this way. And that looks like building small, repeatable habits. Once we're aware of this, what is one thing you can do? And it reminds me of a book that you guys you probably have all heard of, but you should read if you haven't already. It's called Atomic Habits from James Clear, I believe. I'm always shocked at how many recommendations I have for books because I'm like, I don't remember reading all these books, but then I'm like, oh my gosh, I started thinking about these books.
Start
So
building your life library.
I know. I'm like, okay, now I'm like, I read a lot actually. Okay. So that's a great book to read if you're interested in learning how to build small habits that could be repeatable and sustainable. Make sure you avoid the all or nothing approach because if I decide in one day, oh my gosh, this is what I'm going to do every morning, and I'm going to make sure my smoothies are done the night before, I'm going to make sure I wake up early and go for a walk, and I literally normally am running like my life right now is running from waking up to working, that's not going to work. That took a while to build up to how that looks like now. And if I were to probably approach it in that way, it would probably burn out and fizzle out very, very quickly. So do
Mhm.
take one step forward. See what is the one step that makes the most sense for you. Build that as a habit, and then you could go from there.
Also, guys,
And
remember the all or nothing approach is a
mm,
cognitive distortion. It's not helpful for you.
point.
Black
Good
and white
point.
thinking, not helpful.
Not helpful. Great point. And here's something to remind yourself of. If you're only doing self care when you're already burnt out, it's too late. We want to be proactive with our self care. Yes, you can do self care when you're feeling burnt down. If you're feeling some undesired things, you should be doing self-care, but let's try to avoid getting to that place, especially the burnt out place where it could have been avoidable. Make sure that you're practicing self-care as a part of every single day so that you can avoid any type of burnout and be taking care of yourself proactively instead of only reactively.
Mhm. Yeah. And so something you guys might be thinking about, um, as we've talked about all of these more responsible, maybe not fun ways of acting within self-care, something you might be thinking about is like, okay, well, then when do we utilize the scented candles? And when do we utilize the deep breathing? And when do we bring in the guided imagery? And when do we go on those long walks? And when do we take those mental health breaks? Where does that fit in into self-care? And so, Steph and I are just going to take a few minutes to talk about when does that part get utilized? When is that actually considered self-care? Because we talked about how, if you're in a financial crisis, taking deep breaths is not going to help you in that moment. That would
Mm-hmm.
not be the self-care for that point. So let's talk about when that is the appropriate thing to do. So I want you guys to think about the management of mental health in every day. We've talked about this in other episodes, right? So if you know you're somebody that suffers from just getting easily irritated, angry, if you're somebody that suffers from anxiety, OCD, eating disorders, trauma, whatever it is, you know that there are a set of skills that helps you manage your symptoms daily. And by the way, even if you have no diagnosis, if you get very overwhelmed in work, if you have a really tough family to deal with, if you are somebody that has a hard time getting out of bed, if you're somebody that struggles with time management, if you're somebody that struggles with racing thoughts, whatever it is, diagnosis aside, you're gonna find, hopefully, whether it's through therapy or through trial and error, those little things that work for you to help you manage those things. So I know growing up for me, something that I really, really, really suffered from was severe test anxiety. Like I would lose my mind before every single test. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't function. I couldn't remember anything. Like tests were not my thing. Tests are still not my thing. I hate tests. And it took me a while to figure out like the combination of things that helped me to get myself to a somewhat functional place
Mhm.
before I took an exam, whether that was listening to a certain set of music, journaling the night before, giving myself certain mantras. For me, whether it was dealing with anxiety at all, like I would do like a whole nighttime routine with my scented candles just to get me into a calm space, to get me ready for my nighttime routine and to keep myself in a healthy sleep hygiene. Those are more of like maintaining everyday little moments that keep you in a space where you're able to stay in a mentally and physically functional space and healthy space, and a way to get a hold of and get a grip of the things that you specifically struggle with, like what works for you. If you know that every time you get into an argument with your spouse, the thing that's going to get you in a place where you can have a productive conversation is going for a walk, then that might be your form of self-care in that moment.
Mhm.
So thinking about like, these are both very valid and very necessary forms of self-care. They just each have a time and place, and it's not one or the other. And we
Yeah.
don't use one to ignore the other. So you, for example, might be the most financially responsible person and have all your Excel sheets and speak to your financial advisor and whatever, but then you might not be performing any of the things I just mentioned. You might not be utilizing any of those forms of self-care, and so emotionally and maybe within your own thoughts, you're a complete mess.
All great points. And a lot of times, the reason why we wanted to talk about this is because a lot of times we see that only one form of self care, and normally the more glamorous types of things are talked about a lot. But it's really a matter of knowing who you are, what benefits you, what helps you, and making sure that whatever self care you're engaging in that moment is truly for your care and not something that's going to hurt you in the long run. And I am all for the glamorous ways of self-care. I mean, right now I have a candle, well, with a light lamp behind me, and that's something that I enjoy. I am someone who absolutely loves getting a massage or a facial, although for the financial self-care, I might not do that all the time. I might not be able to do that every week, but goals. But every
We're
couple
getting
months,
there. We're getting
we're
there.
getting there. We're getting there. But you know what? That is something that I absolutely think is something that helps me with my physical self care, my mental self care. Every couple months when I'm able to do that, I still need to find a reliable spa over here, but that's okay. I'm working on that too. But these are ways that we can absolutely be engaging in self care. We're not here to overlook those. We just want you to understand that there are also some more minor or smaller, less glamorous ways, rather, of self-care that you might not be
Mhm.
thinking about all the time.
Yeah. And the last thing I want to leave you guys with, in terms of points with this, is that you can utilize things that you're already doing every day as acts of self-care if you set that intention. So I know one of our first episodes we talked about, right? This is coffee and counseling. Steph and I love our coffee. A lot
Mhm.
of people are running in the morning, they push the button, they or whatever, however you do your coffee, your drip, your hot water urn, your whatever. They grab their coffee and they run, but you're still having your coffee. So it can look like that, or it could be like, I'm going to say, this is like how I do my coffee. I push the button of my Nespresso. I literally sit there and breathe in the aromas. I close
Mm.
my eyes. I'm like, oh my gosh, this smells so good. I sit there and pick and choose like how I'm going to orchestrate today's cup of coffee, which pretty mug I want. And this just classic simple thing that I do every morning. I really set that intention of, I called it this in our introductory episode, like this is my cup of happiness. This is my little like aura of light. And something that I do every day just became a little act of self-care. Or like I pray, a lot of Christians, just whoever prays every day, that can very much be a form of self-care. You might already be praying, but maybe you're rushing through it. Maybe you're busy. Maybe you're like, I don't really have the time to connect. If you sit there and you're like, this is my form of self-care. I'm sitting here. I'm taking this moment to really reflect, to meditate, to be mindful, to connect to my higher power or whatever it is that I feel spiritually connected to, that very quickly not only enhances your prayer that you're already doing, but it genuinely becomes a form of self-care, right? So all these things that you're already doing, depending on your relationship with it and your perception of it and your intention behind it, can also turn into an act of self-care just with a few simple tweaks. I talked about this also, I think, with like the postpartum space. I was like, my postpartum self-care is a 5 minute longer shower with a scented candle and like special body soap. And
Mhm.
there's myself. But you know what I mean? It is, it's like you have to work with what you've got.
Mhm.
And that's really
Yeah.
what it comes down to. So just that, last point to keep in mind. But let's wrap it up with some key takeaways. So self care is really anything that supports your overall well being, even the unglamorous stuff, as we've made abundantly clear. You can't buy your way into mental health. Real self care is really often free, but it requires that discipline, that intention, that action towards turning it into self care. If it feels uncomfortable, if it feels painful, if it feels weird, if it feels not fun in that moment, but it still helps you either in the long term or even for that day, then it probably does still count as self care. The best self care is also consistent, it's intentional, and it's integrated into your daily life. It's not just a once in a while, once in a blue moon event.
Mm. And that brings us to today's listener's question. For all of you who are listening, you can send in a question for your chance to be featured in one of our next sessions. And you can email that over to us at coffeeandcounselingpodcast@gmail.com, or you can send it over to us on Instagram at Coffee and Counseling Podcast. So today's listener's question is, what do you think about dream interpretation? I
Oh,
have
snap.
thoughts. So do you want to start off or you want me to start?
I'll start because I
Okay.
really want to know what you think about what I think. So I
Okay.
think as a Jew, as an Orthodox Jew, dream interpretation is a very real thing. It's a
Mhm.
very powerful thing. One of the things that we think about, that we believe, is the way that you interpret a dream gives the dream power. So you have to be very very careful with what is interpreting your dream, who is interpreting your dream, because it gives it power. For anyone who's very interested in this from the Jewish point of view, this is very much based in terms of our belief system and our thought process. It's very much a real thing. There's books on this. There's a lot of rabbis and Kabbalists who talk about this. It goes into so much detail as to what time within the night or morning you had the dream, what was included in the dream, how it was included. It's just very detail oriented. And you want to be very careful with who you talk to help you interpret that dream. We also have a concept that, like, if you've had a quote unquote bad dream, that you shouldn't repeat it. There's certain prayers that you say because you don't want to give it that power. So, from a Jewish perspective, dreams are very, very powerful. From a psychological perspective, which is why I think that this becomes really interesting in my world, because both are valid, there are many things that will come up in your dream, and this is where you probably are very on board with me, Steph, that really is an interpretation of your psyche.
Mhm.
Whether your dreams are reflecting anxiety, fear, stress, like night terrors are a real thing. It could be a symptom of PTSD, of anxiety. A lot of the times it's reflecting what you're going through in life, your deepest fears, your worst days and your happiest moments, your biggest wishes, your biggest dreams. Like, I know what's been really interesting for me is, as I've gotten older, I've had a lot more dreams about dancing and performing and singing, because it was a huge part of my life when I was younger, and it's something I really really loved. And as I've gotten older, it's become a much smaller part of my life just because I don't have time for it right now. So I find myself dreaming about it all the time, and it feels so
Mhm.
so real. So there might not be like some religious interpretation to that, but I think on a psychological note, I'm kind of like playing out my desires in my dream.
Yeah. Well, I never knew that about the Jewish
Yeah, we're very
perspective
big
on
on
that.
dreams over here.
Yeah, that's really interesting because so I never heard of that, but I think it's really interesting and obviously very powerful. And the way that I'm more familiar with it, I know that there's a lot of psychology or people trying to interpret and having mass interpretations of dreams. And I remember growing up hearing this interpretation that like if you have a dream that your teeth fall out, that like you're about to die. And I'm like, I should have been dead like 7 times.
That comes from Judaism, because
R-
having a dream of your teeth falling out is really, really, really bad
Oh,
in Judaism.
well,
Yeah.
it's been a
So
couple
what we
times.
do when we like
Yeah.
in my family, what we do if somebody has a bad dream and you feel like you have to vent it out, is
Mm-hmm.
we say it to someone. This is what we do in my family. I'm not saying this is like a thing,
Okay.
but we will say the literal exact opposite in the best way possible.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'll be like, "Hey mom, last night I had a dream that so and so had like this long, beautiful, healthy, amazing life." And she'll
Mm-hmm.
understand exactly what I'm saying. It was like the dream was
Oh,
probably the exact but
yeah.
instead of saying something bad, we're saying a blessing to bless that person instead of saying something
Mm-hmm.
negative, which is funny because it is very intertwined with psychology, like this
Mm-hmm.
concept of like manifesting good things and positive self-talk and things like that. It is
Mm-hmm.
very interconnected. So that part of it's really interesting to me.
Yeah, it really is interesting. I used to be so interested in dream interpretation. However, I find that a lot of times from the psychology perspective, I think that there's a lot of, oh, well, if you have a dream about this, this is what it means.
Right.
And I think that a lot of times, I know some of my clients who are more into like the spiritual, like manifestation and those types of things will ask like, oh, what's my interpretation of the dream? And then I always reflect it back. I'm like, what's your
Your
interpretation of the
interpret
dream?
exactly.
And
Right.
whatever that person says, like, I'm like, you are your best interpreter.
Mhm.
And I know that for myself, like when I have certain dreams, like I know exactly, if I reflect on it, I know exactly where it's coming from. And if you can say, okay, well, this is something that's been happening in my life, and sometimes it feels all disjointed, but it's like, okay, maybe that's because I'm feeling really anxious right now. Or like, this is really what I'm really wanting right now, which is why I'm dreaming about this. And that is, to me, usually the best ways that we can interpret it is what you think it is. If you're really honest with yourself, is probably a good interpretation because our dreams, there's so much information that we probably still need about it, but it's thought to believe that it's our brain's way of trying to interpret and make sense of the world around us, of what's happening around us. And it's our ways like filing cabinet where everything's trying to figure it out together and put in proper files. So it's really interesting, but I would say that obviously there's a vast different some different answers here that whatever you feel is the most appropriate for you. If you want to look into the Judaism interpretation, I think that's awesome. If you are really just being more reflective, that's awesome too. But maybe there's not a right or wrong answer here.
Mhm.
All right. So thank you guys for listening today. We are encouraging you guys to reflect on this question. What's one thing you've done recently that felt like self-care, maybe even something that no one else would think of as self-care? You could feel free to share it with us. You can email it over again at coffeeandcounselingpodcast@gmail.com or on our Instagram at Coffee and Counseling Podcast, where you can also send over your listeners' questions for your chance to be featured in one of our next sessions. We link everything in the show notes, including for this session, 30 unexpected acts of self-care that might help to give you some insight and reminders of all the different ways of self-care that you might not be thinking of on a daily basis. And if you would like to work with one of us, you can contact us for a free consultation call. Each of our contact information will be linked in the show notes. And everything we talked about today that we referenced will be linked in the show notes as well. We hope you join us again next Tuesday for our next session.
Thank you guys so much for listening. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.
Thank you so much for being with us today. Please follow our Instagram at Coffee and Counseling Podcast and send any questions you have about any topic to us via direct message for a chance for your question to be featured in one of our next sessions. You can also email us your questions or topic suggestions at coffeeandcounselingpodcast@gmail.com. Make sure to check out some of our other sessions available to you right now. Once you drink up all of those and your coffee, come back next Tuesday for our next session.
The information shared in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute therapy or mental health advice. Listening to this podcast does not establish a therapeutic relationship between you and the hosts. If you are in need of support, we encourage you to seek help from a qualified mental health professional. This podcast is not a substitute for individualized care We do offer individualized therapy. If you're interested in individual therapy with one of us, please visit our practice websites and send us an email to set up a free consultation call. All of the links and our contact info will be in the show notes.